The lights went out at 9:47 p.m. Not a flicker, not a gradual dimming, just instant darkness, the kind that swallows everything whole, leaving only the ghost memory of where things used to be. The storm outside had finally claimed its prize, taking down power lines somewhere between here and the next county over. Inside Murphy's Roadhouse, the sudden blackness brought a moment of perfect silence. Then voices erupted. Confusion, nervous laughter. Someone's phone flashlight cutting a weak beam through the void. In the back corner booth, the man they'd later call Doc didn't move. He sat exactly as he had for the past hour. Shoulders hunched, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Eyes fixed on something no one else could see. The emergency lights kicked in after 30 seconds. Pale amber things mounted near the exits, casting everything in sepia tones like an old photograph slowly developing. The light caught the patch on his jacket. Trident. Skull. The unmistakable insignia that marked him as something most people only saw in movies. Navy SEAL. Or former. The difference mattered only to people who'd never been one. Doc's right hand moved to his jacket pocket, fingers finding the object he'd been carrying for 6 years, 3 months, and 14 days. A small purple heart-shaped locket. The cheap kind you'd find in a gas station, the kind a 7-year-old would pick out for her daddy before he deployed. The kind that still held a single photograph. He didn't open it. Hadn't opened it in 2 years. But he could feel its weight, heavier than physics allowed, heavier than gold or lead or guilt. It pressed against his ribs like a promise he'd broken, like a voice calling from across a distance he could never cross. Daddy, you'll come back, right? You always come back. The storm hammered against Murphy's windows. Sheets of rain driven horizontal by wind that sounded like incoming fire. Thunder rolled across the Texas plains, deep and resonant, the kind that rattled your chest cavity. November storms in West Texas were rare but vicious, born from cold fronts colliding with stubborn heat, creating violence where there should have been emptiness. Doc took a sip of cold coffee, grimaced, set it down with the careful precision of someone who'd spent years making every movement count. His eyes swept the roadhouse with tactical efficiency, cataloging without conscious thought. 17 civilians, 2 exits, for windows, multiple points of vulnerability, 1 bartender, 1 waitress. The waitress. She moved through the amberlit darkness like a ghost, checking on tables, reassuring the nervous college kids by the jukebox, telling the truckers clustered at the bar that the generator would kick in any minute. She was maybe 23, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, the kind of tired in her eyes that came from working double shifts and still coming up short on rent. She reminded Doc of someone. The resemblance wasn't exact. Wrong hair color, different nose, but something in the way she moved, the determined set of her shoulders, the smile she manufactured for customers even though you could see it cost her something. His daughter would have been 21 this year, if she'd lived, if leukemia hadn't. He built the wall higher in his mind, the one he'd been constructing brick by brick for 6 years. The one that kept him functional. The one that kept him from putting his Sig Sauer in his mouth and ending the endless loop of what-ifs and if-onlys. The drunk man at the bar had been loud for the past 20 minutes. Getting louder. Big guy, 6'2", maybe 230, construction worker build. His buddies kept trying to ease him down, but he was in that zone where alcohol had stripped away judgment and left only aggression looking for a target. Doc had seen it 1,000 times. In port towns. In training. In the aftermath of operations where adrenaline needed somewhere to go and fists provided easy answers. He knew how this would play out, could read it like a book he'd memorized. The drunk man's name was Tyler Moss. Doc didn't know that yet, but he would. He'd know everything about Tyler by the time the night ended. His blood type, his weaknesses, his pressure points, the exact angle required to drop him without permanent damage. But that was for later. For now, Doc just watched. Waited. Tried to ignore the locket pressing against his ribs. Tried to forget that today marked 6 years since he'd held his daughter's hand in that hospital room. Felt it go slack. Heard the monitor's transition from beeping to that single endless tone that meant gone. Gone. Forever gone. He'd been on leave. Home for once. There to watch her die because God or fate or random chance had decided that this one time, he wouldn't be deployed. This one time, he'd be present for the worst moment of his life. "Daddy, will heaven have dogs? I hope it has dogs." She'd asked that 3 hours before the end. Doc had promised yes, definitely dogs, all the dogs she wanted. He'd held her hand and lied about certainty when he'd never been less certain about anything in his life. The waitress, her name tag read Emma Hartley, in neat handwriting, approached Doc's booth. She had a pot of fresh coffee in one hand, her smile firmly in place despite the darkness, despite the storm, despite Tyler Moss's escalating volume. "Warm that up for you?" she asked. Doc looked up, met her eyes, saw something there that made his chest constrict. The same stubborn hope his daughter had carried, the same refusal to let circumstances break her spirit. "Please," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended, months of minimal use making it gravelly. Emma poured. Her hands were steady despite the trembling emergency lights. "Storm's supposed to pass in an hour or so. Generator should be up any minute." "Okay." She lingered. Most waitresses would have moved on, especially in a roadhouse during a power outage. But something in her expression said she recognized something in him. Maybe the 1,000-yard stare. Maybe the way he sat back to the wall, eyes on exits. Maybe just the bone-deep exhaustion that marked people who'd seen too much. "You doing all right?" she asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him that? Really asked, not just social reflex. "I'm..." "Sweetheart." Tyler Moss's voice cut through the roadhouse like a chainsaw. "How about some service over here?" Emma's smile didn't falter, but Doc saw her shoulders tense. "Be right there," she called back, professional and warm. She turned to leave. Doc's hand moved before his brain processed it, catching her wrist gently. She froze. "Careful with that one," Doc said quietly. "He's escalating." Emma looked down at where Doc's fingers circled her wrist, loose enough she could pull away, firm enough to communicate urgency. Then she looked at his face, really looked, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or warning. "I've handled worse," she said. But her voice had lost some of its certainty. Doc released her wrist. "I'm sure you have. Just be careful." She nodded, gave him a smile that was more real than professional, and headed toward the bar. Doc watched her go, watched Tyler Moss track her approach with the fixed intensity of a predator spotting prey. The storm outside intensified. Thunder crashed so close the windows rattled in their frames. The emergency lights flickered but held. Doc's hand found the locket again. Squeezed. "Daddy, promise you'll always protect people. Even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." That had been one of the last things she'd said. Her morphine-addled brain making him promise things he wasn't sure he could keep. He'd been protecting people his entire adult life. Teammates, civilians, assets. He'd been good at it. The best, some said. But he couldn't protect the one person who'd mattered most. So he'd quit. Hung up the trident. Walked away from the teams with an honorable discharge and a head full of ghosts. He'd sworn never to fight again. Never to use his skills. Never to put himself in a position where he might fail someone else who trusted him. He'd become a ghost himself. Drifting from town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to form connections. Never staying long enough to care. But tonight, in this roadhouse, watching Emma Hartley approach Tyler Moss with coffee and courtesy, Doc felt something stir in his chest. Something he'd thought was dead. Responsibility. No, he told himself. Not your problem. Let the bartender handle it. Let her handle it. You're done with protecting. Done with failing. Tyler Moss stood as Emma approached. He was unsteady on his feet, swaying slightly. His friends had gone quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The whole bar had gone quiet, actually. That particular silence that falls when violence becomes inevitable, when everyone holds their breath and waits to see which way things will break. "'Bout time, darlin'," Tyler slurred. He reached for Emma, hand going for her waist in a move that was meant to be playful but came across as aggressive. Emma stepped back smoothly, professionally. "What can I get you, sir?" "Sir." Tyler's face darkened. Sir? What am I? A stranger. Been comin' here for 5 years. Then you know the rules, Tyler. No touching the staff. Rules. Tyler spat the word. Always rules. Always someone telling me what I can't do. Can't touch. Can't say. Can't. Tyler. The bartender, name tag read Rick Martinez, leaned across the bar. Buddy, how about we call you an Uber? Get you home safe. Tyler's attention snapped to Rick. I don't need an Uber. I need another beer and some respect from employees who should. We've respected you all night, Emma said, her voice still calm but with steel underneath. You've had 6 beers. We're cutting you off. It's policy. Wrong thing to say. Doc knew it before the words finished leaving her mouth. Men like Tyler Moss, men who'd spent their whole lives being told they weren't enough, who wore their fragile masculinity like armor. You didn't say policy to men like that. You didn't say no. Tyler's hand came up fast. Not a closed fist. He was too drunk for precision, but open, aimed for Emma's face in a slap that would have split her lip, given her a black eye, marked her for weeks. The hand never connected, because Doc was already moving. He'd left his booth before Tyler's hand finished rising, crossed the 15 feet in less than 2 seconds. His training, his muscle memory, his thousands of hours of practice, all of it activated without conscious thought. His left hand caught Tyler's wrist mid-swing. His right hand found Tyler's elbow. A simple joint lock, the kind they taught in week 1 of BUD/S, the kind that worked on drunk civilians just as well as enemy combatants. Tyler froze, his hand 6 inches from Emma's face, locked in place by a grip that might as well have been steel. The roadhouse went completely silent. Even the storm seemed to pause. Everyone stared at the quiet man in the corner booth, the one who'd been sitting so still they'd almost forgotten he was there, the one who just moved like lightning and now held Tyler Moss's arm in a grip that promised pain if Tyler tried anything stupid. Tyler's eyes tracked down to Doc's jacket, to the patch, to the trident. His face went from red to white in the space of a heartbeat. Here's what most people don't understand about violence. It announces itself. The tension builds, the warning signs flash, and you've got maybe 3 seconds to recognize them before everything goes sideways. Tyler Moss showed every signal, and most people would have missed them all. We break down real situations like this because understanding violence isn't about paranoia, it's about preparation. Subscribe now so you're never the person who says, I didn't see it coming. Because when those 3 seconds arrive, knowledge is the only thing standing between you and disaster. Still watching without subscribing? Drop a comment and tell us what's holding you back. We want to know. Let go of me, Tyler said. His voice had lost all its aggression, replaced by something that might have been fear. Man, I wasn't gonna, I was just, you were just about to hit a woman half your size, Doc said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, something cold and final. Over nothing, over pride, over 6 beers and a bruised ego. Tyler tried to pull his arm back. Doc's grip didn't budge. Might as well have been trying to move a mountain. I said let go. Doc applied pressure. Just a fraction. Just enough. Tyler's knees buckled slightly, pain shooting through nerve clusters. In about 3 seconds, I'm going to release you. When I do, you're going to sit down, shut up, and wait for your ride. Understood. Tyler nodded frantically. Say it. Understood. Tyler gasped. Doc released him. Tyler stumbled backward, caught by his friends, who'd suddenly decided they were very interested in getting their buddy out of there. They threw bills on the bar, muttered apologies, and half-carried Tyler toward the door. The storm swallowed them as they left. The door banged shut. The roadhouse remained silent. Doc stood in the middle of the floor, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at him. 17 pairs of eyes, all locked on the quiet man who just demonstrated that he was anything but harmless. Emma stood frozen, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing hard. How did you? Are you okay? Doc asked. His voice had returned to that rough gentleness. Yes. Thank you. God, thank you. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. That was, what are you? Wrong question. Or maybe the right one. Doc had spent 6 years trying to figure out what he was now that he wasn't a SEAL, now that he wasn't a father, now that he was just a collection of skills and scars drifting through the world. Just passing through, he said, which was true and completely inadequate. Rick had come around the bar, looking shaken. Jesus, man. I was about to call the cops. But you just... I've never seen anyone move that fast. He telegraphed it, Doc said simply. Shoulders tensed. Weight shifted forward. Hand rose. You had at least 2 seconds. 2 seconds? I barely saw him start to. Rick shook his head. Listen, I don't know who you are, but those drinks are on the house. Least I can do. Not necessary. Yeah, it is. You just saved Emma from... Rick's voice caught. From whatever that was gonna be. Emma had recovered some of her composure. She touched Doc's arm lightly. Thank you. Really. I've dealt with drunk idiots before, but Tyler... He's never gotten physical. I thought I could handle it. You shouldn't have to handle it, Doc said. The words came out sharper than intended. You should be able to do your job without worrying about getting hit. Yeah, well, Emma's smile was brittle. Welcome to the service industry. The generator finally kicked in. The lights stuttered, then came back. Full fluorescent brightness that made everyone blink. The jukebox rebooted with a burst of static, then started playing whatever song had been cued before the outage. Garth Brooks. The Dance. Of course. Because the universe had a sense of humor. Doc moved to return to his booth. Emma caught his arm again. Wait, at least let me get you fresh coffee. Real coffee. Not the stuff that's been sitting. He should say no. Should distance himself. Should maintain the walls he'd built. But something in her expression, gratitude mixed with curiosity, the same look his daughter used to give him when he'd pick her up from school early, made him nod. Okay. Sit at the counter, Emma said. I want to keep an eye on you. Keep an eye on me? Make sure you don't disappear. We get a lot of drifters through here. They show up, they leave, you never see them again. She studied his face. You've got that look. What look? The leaving look. She wasn't wrong. Doc had been planning to settle his tab after finishing his coffee, get in his truck and drive through the night. Keep moving. Always keep moving, because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant remembering and remembering meant, Daddy, stay. Please stay. Just a little longer. He pushed the memory down, followed Emma to the counter, slid onto a stool that had probably been there since the 1980s. The roadhouse looked different from this angle, less like a way station and more like a place where people actually existed, actually lived their lives. Behind the bar, Rick was serving the truckers who'd watched the whole thing. They kept glancing at Doc, whispering. The patch on his jacket had been noted, catalogued, discussed. Navy SEAL. The real deal. Not the wannabes who bought the gear at surplus stores and talked tough at barbecues. The real thing. Doc kept his eyes forward. Emma poured fresh coffee, actually fresh, steam rising in spirals. She added cream and sugar without asking how he took it. Black's fine, he said. I know. But you've been drinking it black all night. Figured you could use some sweetness. She pushed the cup toward him. Doctor's orders. I'm not a doctor. Your friends call you Doc, though, don't they? She tapped the patch on his jacket. SEALs have nicknames. Everyone knows that. He didn't ask how she knew. The patch told most of the story. The rest people filled in with movies and speculation and myths that were sometimes close to truth. Used to, he said. Not anymore. Used to be a SEAL or used to have friends? The question hit harder than she probably intended. Doc took a sip of coffee. It was too sweet, too light, too far from the battery acid he'd trained himself to drink. But it tasted like something, and he'd gone so long without tasting anything. Both, he said finally. Emma leaned against the counter, studying him. The roadhouse was returning to normal around them. Conversations resuming, the truckers going back to their meals, the college kids feeding quarters into the jukebox. But in this small bubble at the counter, it was just the two of them. What happened? Emma asked quietly. That's a long story. We've got time. Storm's still going. Roads are going to be bad for hours. She glanced out the window, where rain continued to sheet against glass. Besides, you saved me from Tyler. Least I can do is listen. Doc's hand found the locket through his jacket. Emma's eyes tracked the movement. What's that? Nothing. Doesn't look like nothing. She was too perceptive. Or maybe he was too obvious. 6 years of carrying grief, and it still showed through every gesture, every pause, every moment when he thought no one was watching. A reminder, Doc said, which was true. Of what? That I'm not a hero. Emma's eyebrows rose. You just stopped a man twice your size from hitting me. Feels pretty heroic. That was reflex. Training. Not heroism. What's the difference? Doc looked at her. Really looked. Saw his daughter in the set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the determination not to let this go. His daughter would have been like this. Asking questions, pushing boundaries, refusing to accept easy answers. Would have been. Past tense. Always past tense. Heroes save people, Doc said quietly. I let someone die. The words hung in the air between them. Emma didn't respond immediately. She was smart enough to recognize the weight of what he'd just said, the trust implicit in sharing it. Was it in combat? She asked finally. No. It was in a hospital room in Virginia Beach. 6 years ago. Today, actually. Doc laughed, but it had no humor in it. 6 years. You'd think it would get easier. Does it? No. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee. Sipped it. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, more distant now. The worst of the storm was passing. Soon the roads would be clear. Soon Doc would have no reason to stay. You don't have to tell me, Emma said. But I'm here if you want to. This was the moment, the decision point. Doc had spent 6 years keeping this locked inside, building walls, refusing to share the weight. Sharing meant vulnerability, meant connection, meant caring, meant risking getting hurt again. But sitting here, in this roadhouse, with the storm outside and the fluorescent lights inside and this young woman who reminded him so much of what he'd lost, Doc felt something crack. Not break, crack, like ice on a frozen river when spring came. Her name was Sarah, he said. The name felt strange in his mouth. Foreign. He hadn't said it aloud in 3 years. My daughter. She was 7 when she died. Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic. We fought it for 2 years. Chemo, radiation, bone marrow transplants. She was so brave. Braver than any SEAL I ever served with. Emma's hand found his across the counter. Her fingers were warm. Real. Anchoring. I was home on leave when it happened, Doc continued. The words were coming faster now. A dam breaking. I'd been deployed for most of her treatment. Missing doctor appointments, missing chemo sessions, missing her life while I was off saving strangers in countries I can't name. But I was there at the end. Got to hold her hand while she... His voice broke completely. He'd spent 6 years not crying, not breaking, not letting anyone see the wound. But Emma's hand squeezed his, and something in that simple gesture of human connection destroyed every wall he'd built. She asked me to promise, Doc whispered. Promise I'd keep protecting people. Keep being a hero. Keep doing what I do. And I promised. But the moment she was gone, I realized I'd been protecting strangers, while the one person who needed me most was dying in a hospital bed. That's not fair to yourself, Emma said quietly. Fair. Doc laughed bitterly. Fair is she should be alive. Fair is she should be in college right now, studying veterinary medicine because she wanted to help animals. Fair is she should have had a life. But she didn't. Because I wasn't there. Because I chose. You didn't choose this. Cancer chose. I chose to stay in the teams. Chose to keep deploying. My wife begged me to take a desk job, stay stateside. I said no. Said I was needed. And maybe I was. But Sarah needed me more. The roadhouse buzzed with conversation around them, but Doc barely heard it. He was back in that hospital room, holding a small hand that was too cold, watching monitors that were going flat, hearing his daughter's last words. I love you, Daddy. Don't be sad. I'll wait for you in heaven. With all the dogs. After she died, I couldn't do it anymore, Doc said. Couldn't pick up a weapon. Couldn't run missions. Couldn't save strangers when I couldn't save my own daughter. So I quit. Handed in my trident. Walked away. Swore I'd never fight again. Never use my training. Never put myself in a position where I might fail someone else. But tonight you did, Emma said. You used your training. You protected me. That was different. How? Doc couldn't answer. Because she was right. He'd broken his vow the moment Tyler Moss had raised his hand. All that training, all those years, all those skills they'd activated without thought. Muscle memory overriding 6 years of self-imposed restraint. He'd protected someone, and it had felt right. I don't know, Doc admitted. I saw him about to hit you and I just moved. Didn't think about it. Just did it. That's called being a good person, Emma said. That's called doing what's right even when it's hard. Or maybe it's called being unable to change who you fundamentally are. And who are you fundamentally? Doc looked at the patch on his jacket. The trident. The symbol that had defined him for 2 decades. The identity he tried to shed like a snake shedding skin, only to discover that some skins went too deep to remove. I don't know anymore, he said honestly. Emma squeezed his hand one more time, then released it. Well, whoever you are, I'm grateful you were here tonight. Tyler's never gotten violent before, but there's a first time for everything. You stopped that first time from happening. She poured more coffee. The storm outside was definitely passing now, the rain lighter, the thunder more distant. The emergency lights clicked off as the main power stabilized. The roadhouse felt smaller somehow, more intimate. Can I ask you something? Emma said. Sure. What were you doing here? Tonight, this isn't exactly a tourist destination. Doc had been asking himself the same question. He'd been driving with no destination, just putting miles between himself and the last town, the last job, the last place where he'd started to feel comfortable. He'd seen the roadhouse lights and pulled in, planning to grab coffee and keep moving. But then the storm had hit, and the power had gone out, and Tyler Moss had raised his hand. And now he was sitting here, having shared more in 30 minutes than he had in 6 years. Just passing through, he said again. Still true. Still inadequate. Emma smiled. You said that before. I don't believe you. Why not? Because people who are just passing through don't carry pictures in heart-shaped lockets. They don't get that look in their eyes when they think no one's watching. They don't intervene when drunk men get aggressive. She studied his face. You're looking for something. Maybe. What? Doc pulled out the locket. Opened it for the first time in 2 years. Inside was a tiny photograph. Sarah at age 5, missing her 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera with pure joy. Before the diagnosis. Before the hospitals. Before the end. Emma looked at the photo. Her eyes went soft. She's beautiful. Was, Doc corrected quietly. She was beautiful. Is, Emma said firmly. She is beautiful. Present tense. Because she's still with you. Still in your heart. Still making you want to protect people even when you think you've given up. The words hit Doc like a physical blow. He stared at this waitress, this stranger who'd somehow seen through 6 years of armor in 30 minutes, who'd said the thing he'd been afraid to believe. I failed her, Doc whispered. No, you loved her. That's not the same thing. I wasn't there when. You were there at the end. You held her hand. You made her last moments filled with love. That's not failure. That's the hardest kind of success. Doc closed the locket. His vision was blurred. When had he started crying? He didn't remember, but tears were running down his face, hot and unfamiliar and somehow cleansing. I miss her, he said. God. I miss her so much. I know, Emma said softly. I know you do. They sat in silence for a long moment. The roadhouse hummed around them, normal life resuming, people eating and drinking and laughing and living. The world kept turning even when your world had stopped. Finally, Emma spoke again. My mom died when I was 16. Cancer like your daughter. I was angry for years. Angry at her for dying. Angry at God for taking her. angry at myself for not being enough to make her stay. Doc looked up. Emma's eyes were distant, seeing something beyond the roadhouse walls. But eventually, I realized something, she continued. Being angry was easier than being sad. Anger has energy. Sadness just hurts. So I stayed angry because it felt like doing something. Like if I was angry enough, maybe I could change what happened. What changed? Doc asked. Nothing. And everything. One day I just stopped. Stopped being angry. Stopped trying to change the past. Started trying to honor her instead. She'd wanted me to be happy, to live my life, to find joy. Being angry was the opposite of what she'd wanted. So I let it go. Just like that. God, no. Took years. Therapy. Medication. A lot of crying in parking lots. Emma smiled sadly. But eventually I got there. Got to a place where I could remember her without it hurting quite so much. Where I could carry her with me without being crushed by the weight. Doc touched the locket through his jacket. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to know. You just have to try. Before Doc could respond, the front door banged open. Rick's head snapped up from where he'd been restocking the bar. Emma turned on her stool. Tyler Moss stood in the doorway, soaking wet, swaying on his feet. But his expression had changed. The drunken aggression was gone, replaced by something else. Fear. Desperation. Panic. Help! Tyler gasped. My truck went off the road. My friends, they're trapped. Water's rising. I need help. Please. The roadhouse went silent. Everyone stared at Tyler. This was the man who'd been about to hit Emma 30 minutes ago. The man who'd been thrown out. The man who'd been nothing but a problem. Now he was begging for help. Rick reached for his phone. I'll call 911. No time, Tyler interrupted. Water's rising fast. Roads washed out. They're gonna drown if someone doesn't. His eyes found document you. You're military. You can help. Please. I know I was an asshole, but they're my friends and I. Doc was already standing. 6 years of restraint. 6 years of swearing never to use his skills again. 6 years of running from who he was. All of it evaporated in an instant. Because sitting in front of him was a problem that required exactly the skills he possessed. And people were dying. And he could save them. Or he could fail them like he'd failed Sarah. The choice was no choice at all. Where? Doc asked, his voice shifting into something different. Something harder. Something military. 2 miles north. Bridge over Wilson Creek. Trucks on its side in the water. They can't get out. The doors are jammed and... How many? 2. Mark and Casey. Both my age. Good guys. Not their fault. Injuries. I don't know. I climbed out through the window, but they're trapped in the cab and... Doc was already moving toward the door. Emma caught his arm. Doc, you can't... The storm, the flooding, you could... He looked at her. Saw concern. Saw fear for him. Saw something else too. Something that looked like pride. I have to, he said simply. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Emma's voice was steel. You'll need help. And I know first aid. I'm coming. Rick stepped forward. I'll drive. My truck's got 4-wheel drive and... No, Doc said. You stay here. Call 911. Tell them the situation. Get ambulances en route. But they won't get there in time. This has to be fast. He looked at Tyler. You, in my truck. Now, you're going to guide me to exactly where they are. And then you're going to do exactly what I tell you. Understood. Tyler nodded frantically. Yes, God, yes. Thank you. I'm sorry about before Later, Doc said curtly. Right now we have approximately 10 minutes before your friends are underwater. Let's move. 10 minutes. That's all the time they had. Most people think emergencies unfold slowly, that you have hours to respond. But the truth? Real disasters happen in minutes, seconds even. And the people who survive are the ones who know what to do before the crisis hits. We share these stories not just for drama, but because preparation is the difference between tragedy and survival. Subscribe now so you're never the person frantically Googling what to do while time runs out. If you're still hesitating, comment below. What's stopping you? Doc's truck was a Ford F-150, 10 years old, beat to hell but mechanically sound. He kept it that way deliberately. Maintenance was meditation, something to occupy his hands when his mind wandered to places it shouldn't go. He drove. Tyler directed. Emma sat in the back, silent but radiating determination. The storm hadn't passed as much as Doc had thought. The rain was still heavy, visibility maybe 50 feet. The roads were rivers, water flowing across asphalt in sheets. Doc navigated with the confidence of someone who'd driven through worse. Afghanistan during monsoon season, Iraqi deserts during sandstorms, Navy operations in conditions that would ground civilian aircraft. This was bad, but not impossible. There, Tyler pointed. That's the bridge. What had been a bridge. Now it was a half-submerged concrete structure with water pouring over it in violent torrents. Wilson Creek had gone from creek to river in the space of hours. Flash flooding, the kind that killed people every year in Texas because they thought they could make it across. Doc could see the truck. Silver Dodge Ram on its side, cab partially submerged, water already up to the windows. The current was strong. Strong enough that Doc could see the vehicle shifting, settling deeper as water undermined the creek bed. He killed the engine, assessed, calculated. How long since they went in? Doc asked. Maybe 20 minutes. I climbed out right after we crashed, ran to the roadhouse. They were yelling when I left, but I couldn't hear them over the water. 20 minutes. In cold water, in a confined space, possibly injured. Not good, but not hopeless. Not yet. Doc grabbed his go bag from the back. He'd carried one for 6 years, even after leaving the teams. Rope, first aid kit, knife, flashlight, mylar blankets. The tools of someone who'd never fully stopped being a rescue operative. Emma, he said, turning to her. I need you to stay in the truck. Engine running. Heater on full. When I bring them out, they're going to be hypothermic. You'll need to have those blankets ready. What about you? I'll be fine. Doc. He looked at her. Let her see the certainty in his eyes. I've done this before. Not exactly this, but close enough. Trust me. Emma nodded slowly. Okay. But if you're not back in 15 minutes, I will be. He turned to Tyler. You're with me. You're gonna hold the line. Give me something to pull against. Can you do that? Tyler's face was pale, but he nodded. Yes, whatever you need. Doc tied rope around his waist. Handed the other end to Tyler. You anchor here. You feel 3 tugs, you pull. Hard and fast. Don't hesitate. Got it. Doc took a breath. Looked at the raging water. Calculated angles, currents, risks. His brain shifted into combat mode. That cold, analytical state where fear got locked away and training took over. He hadn't felt this way in 6 years. Hadn't let himself feel this way. Felt like coming home. Sarah, he whispered to the locket. Watch over me. Then he walked into the flood. The cold hit him like a sledgehammer. Texas water in November wasn't hypothermia cold like Alaska, but it was cold enough. 50 degrees, maybe. Enough to drain strength, numb extremities, kill you if you stayed in too long. Doc pushed forward. The current tried to sweep his legs out. He leaned into it, using his weight, using angles he'd learned carrying wounded teammates through rivers in Southeast Asia. Step by step. Fighting for every foot. The truck was 40 feet from shore. Might as well have been 40 miles. 20 feet. 30. The water was up to his chest now. The current a living thing trying to drag him away. His boots found purchase on submerged rocks, on the creek bed, on anything solid. 35 feet. He reached the truck. The cab was on its side, driver's window facing up, partially above water. Doc pulled himself up the slick metal, found handholds, positioned himself. Mark! Casey! He shouted. A face appeared at the window. Young guy, maybe 25, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Terrified eyes. Help! We're trapped. The doors are jammed and the waters. I'm here. I'm getting you out. Is Casey conscious? Yeah, but his leg is trapped under the dash. We can't move him and... Okay, listen to me. I need you calm. I need you focused. Can you do that? Mark nodded frantically. Yes, God, yes. Who are you? Someone who's done this before. The window? Can you roll it down? It's broken. Won't move. Doc assessed. The window was intact but wouldn't open. He'd have to break it, which meant glass in the water, which meant potential injuries. But there wasn't another option. Both of you turn your faces away. Cover your heads with your arms. I'm breaking the glass. He pulled his knife, a K-bar he'd carried for 15 years, and used the pommel to strike the window. Once, twice. The third strike spiderwebbed it. The fourth shattered it completely. Water immediately poured into the cab. Mark screamed. It's okay, Doc shouted. The water equalizes pressure, makes it easier to open doors. Trust me. He cleared the glass, created an opening, reached in, found Mark's arm. You first. Can you climb out? What about Casey? I'll get Casey. You first. That's an order. Something in Doc's voice, command authority, the tone that had led men through war zones, made Mark obey. He grabbed Doc's arm, let himself be pulled through the window. Doc guided him toward shore, where Tyler grabbed him and pulled him to safety. Doc turned back to the truck. Water was pouring and now the cab filling fast. He could see Casey inside, pinned, water up to his chest and rising. Casey, Doc called. I can't move. My leg. I'm coming in. Hold on. Doc dove through the window. The cab was chaos. Dark. Filling with water, metal and glass everywhere. He found Casey in the darkness, felt along his body with practiced efficiency. Left leg pinned under the collapsed dashboard, ankle bent at a wrong angle. Broken, definitely, but the bleeding didn't feel arterial. Could be worse. This is going to hurt, Doc warned. But I need to free your leg. Just do it. Doc braced himself. Used leverage, used strength, used every trick he'd learned in 2 decades of combat medicine. The dashboard shifted more. Casey screamed as his leg came free. Got you, Doc said. Arms around my neck. Now. Casey grabbed on. Doc pulled them both toward the window. The water was up to their necks now, the truck settling deeper. 10 seconds, maybe 15 before the cab was completely submerged. They reached the window. Doc pushed Casey through first, then followed. The current caught them immediately, trying to sweep them downstream. But the rope held. Doc felt it go taut, felt Tyler pulling. He grabbed Casey, kept his head above water, let Tyler do the work. Shore got closer. Emma was there, reaching out, grabbing Casey, pulling him to safety. Doc's boots found mud. He stumbled forward, fell to his knees, gasping. The cold was catching up with him now, adrenaline wearing off, leaving him shaking. Emma was there, wrapping him in a mylar blanket, talking to him, her voice cutting through the roar of water and blood in his ears. You did it. They're both alive. You saved them. Doc looked at Mark and Casey, both wrapped in blankets, both crying, both alive. Tyler was kneeling beside them, sobbing apologies. 2 people who would have died. 2 people who were breathing because Doc had broken his 6-year vow. 2 people saved, not 2 people lost. The math didn't balance. Saving Mark and Casey didn't bring back Sarah. Didn't erase the hospital room, the monitors going flat, the small hand going cold in his. But it was something. It was proof that he could still do this. That his skills, his training, his purpose, they weren't useless. They weren't tainted by failure. They could still save lives. Doc, Emma said quietly, are you okay? He looked at her, at this waitress who'd seen through his walls, who'd listened to his confession, who'd insisted on coming with him into danger. I don't know, he said honestly. Ask me tomorrow. She smiled. That sounds like progress. Sirens wailed in the distance. The ambulances Rick had called. Help was coming. Official help. The kind with trauma boards and IVs in hospitals. But they'd been too far away. If Doc hadn't been there, Mark and Casey would have drowned before the EMTs arrived. Timing, luck, fate, whatever you wanted to call it. Doc called it a second chance. They ended up back at Murphy's Roadhouse 2 hours later. The EMTs had checked everyone. Minor hypothermia for Doc, broken ankle for Casey, concussion for Mark, shock for all three. They'd wanted to transport everyone to the hospital, but Doc had refused. Casey and Mark had been loaded into ambulances. Tyler had ridden with them, still apologizing, still crying. Doc had driven back with Emma. Both of them wrapped in emergency blankets, heater blasting, silence filling the cab. The roadhouse was nearly empty when they returned. Just Rick and a handful of truckers who'd heard about the rescue and wanted to buy Doc drinks. He accepted water, refused everything else. Sat at the counter while Emma made him hot coffee. Black this time, no sugar. "You should have gone to the hospital," Rick said. "You were in that water for—" "I'm fine. You're shaking. That's adrenaline crash. I know what hypothermia feels like. This isn't it." Rick studied him, then nodded. Poured himself a whiskey. "You military guys are something else. We're just trained." "No," Rick said firmly. "Training gets you part way. But jumping into flood water to save two strangers? That's something else. That's character." Doc didn't respond. He was too tired for philosophical debates about heroism and character. He just wanted the shaking to stop. Wanted the images to stop replaying. Casey's leg trapped, Mark's terrified face, water pouring into the cab. Wanted to stop seeing Sarah's face superimposed over it all. Emma sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. She'd been quiet since the rescue, processing something Doc couldn't read. "You broke your promise," she said finally. Doc looked at her. "What? Your promise? 6 years ago. You swore never to fight again. Never to use your training. But tonight you did. That was different." "How?" "I wasn't fighting. I was saving." "And you think those are different things?" Emma turned to face him fully. "Doc, every fight you ever fought as a SEAL, what was the goal?" "Mission completion." "And what was the mission?" Doc opened his mouth, closed it, because the answer was obvious, so obvious he'd somehow lost sight of it in 6 years of guilt and self-imposed exile. "Protection," he said quietly. "The mission was always protection. Protecting assets, civilians, teammates. Protecting people who couldn't protect themselves." "Exactly," Emma said. "So tonight, when you jumped into that flood, when you pulled those men out of a sinking truck, you weren't breaking your promise. You were keeping it. You were protecting people. Just like Sarah asked you to." The words hit Doc like a physical blow. He looked down at the locket, at the heart-shaped reminder of everything he'd lost. "Daddy, promise you'll always protect people. Even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." "She asked me to keep being a hero," Doc whispered. "And I thought that meant staying in the teams. Thought that meant choosing missions over her. So when she died, I swore I'd never choose that again. Never put the mission before the people I loved." "But you weren't choosing the mission over her," Emma said gently. "You were doing exactly what she asked you to do. What she wanted you to do. And maybe," she paused, choosing words carefully, "maybe the best way to honor her memory isn't to stop protecting people. Maybe it's to keep doing it. Because that's what she believed in. That's who she wanted you to be." Doc's hands shook around his coffee mug. Not from cold. From something else. Something that felt like 6 years of frozen grief finally beginning to thaw. "I couldn't save her," he said. "I was right there and I couldn't save her." "I know. And that's the worst kind of helplessness. Watching someone you love slip away and knowing there's nothing you can do." Emma's hand found his. "But Doc, cancer isn't an enemy you can shoot or a trap you can disarm. It's not something SEAL training prepares you for. You couldn't save Sarah because Sarah couldn't be saved. Not by you, not by doctors, not by anyone. That's not failure. That's just loss. It feels like failure. I know it does. But there's a difference between failing and losing. Failure means you didn't try, didn't care, didn't show up. You did all those things. You were there. You held her hand. You made her last moments full of love. That's not failure." Doc looked at this waitress who'd somehow become something more. Confessor, therapist, friend. This stranger who'd listened without judgment. who'd seen his brokenness and hadn't turned away. "How are you so smart?" he asked. Emma laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. "I've had a lot of therapy. Like a lot. And I've spent 6 years working in a place where people pass through, tell their stories, move on. You learn things about grief, about healing, about how people carry pain. And I've learned that the people who heal aren't the ones who forget or move on. They're the ones who figure out how to carry their pain while still living, who honor their loss without being buried by it." She squeezed his hand. "You've been buried, document 6 years underground. But tonight you climbed out. You saved 2 lives. And I think maybe you started saving your own." The roadhouse had gone completely silent. Doc realized the truckers were listening, pretending not to but obviously hanging on every word. Rick was frozen behind the bar, his hand still on the whiskey bottle. Even the jukebox had stopped. "I don't know if I can do this," Doc said quietly. "Caring again. Risking again. What if I fail? What if you succeed?" Emma countered. "What if you save someone else? What if you make the difference? Would Sarah want you hiding in corners and drifting through life? Or would she want you doing what you were born to do?" Doc opened the locket, looked at his daughter's gap-toothed smile, remembered her voice, her laugh, the way she'd hug him so tight when he came home from deployment. "Daddy, you'll always be my hero." She'd said that a week before she died, through morphine and pain and the exhaustion of a body giving up. She'd looked at him with those bright eyes and smiled and said words he'd carried like stones ever since. But maybe Emma was right. Maybe they weren't meant to be stones. Maybe they were meant to be wings. "I'm terrified," Doc admitted, "of caring, of trying, of failing again." "Good," Emma said. "That means you're alive. Dead people don't get scared." Before Doc could respond, the front door opened. Tyler Moss stood in the doorway, soaking wet again, but his expression had completely transformed. Behind him stood 2 young men, Mark and Casey, both bandaged, both on crutches, but both alive. "We wanted to say thank you," Tyler said, his voice rough. "The doctors said if you'd waited even 5 more minutes." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Mark stepped forward, limping, extended his hand. "I'm alive because of you. Casey's alive because of you. I don't know how to thank you for that." Doc stood slowly, took Mark's hand, shook it. The grip was firm, warm, real. The handshake of someone who'd been given a second chance. "Just live," Doc said quietly. "Live well. Live fully. That's thanks enough." Casey hobbled forward next. "The EMT said you were hypothermic when you came out. That you should have gone to the hospital yourself. You risked your life for us. For 2 strangers." "Not strangers," Doc said. "Never strangers. We're all in this together." Tyler was last. He approached slowly, shame written across his face. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you saving my friends after what I—" Doc cut him off. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. You made a mistake. You owned it. You ran for help when your friends needed you. That takes courage. I almost hit Emma. You almost did. But you didn't. And now you get to choose who you are moving forward. The man who raises his hand, or the man who extends it." Doc offered his hand. "Choose." Tyler stared at the offered hand. Then, with tears streaming down his face, he took it. "Thank you," Tyler whispered, "for everything. For saving them. For not giving up on me. For giving you what you needed in that moment." Doc finished. "A lesson learned the hard way. Use it." The 4 men stood there, Tyler, Mark, Casey, and Doc, connected by a single night, a single storm, a single choice to help instead of harm. Rick cleared his throat. "Well, this got emotional. Who needs a drink?" Everyone laughed, the tension breaking. Emma moved beside Doc, her presence a comfort he hadn't realized he needed. "So," she said quietly, for his ears only, "still planning to keep drifting? Still planning to stay buried?" Doc looked around the roadhouse, at Rick pouring drinks, at the truckers who'd become witnesses to something profound, at Tyler, Mark, and Casey, 3 lives that almost ended but didn't. At Emma, this waitress who'd become his confessor and his mirror. He touched the locket, felt its weight, but for the first time in 6 years it didn't feel crushing. Felt like what it was, a reminder, not of failure, of love. I don't know, Doc said honestly, but I think I'm ready to find out. Emma smiled. That's the best answer I've heard all night. This is the moment everything changes. Not just for Doc, for everyone. Because we all carry something. Loss, regret, failure, fear. The question isn't whether you'll face darkness. It's whether you'll let it define you. Stories like this exist because someone needs to hear them. Someone needs permission to try again. Someone needs to know that healing isn't betrayal. It's honor. Subscribe so you're here when we tell the next one. Because these aren't just stories about warriors. They're stories about being human. If you haven't subscribed yet, comment and tell us why. We genuinely want to understand. The storm broke completely around midnight. Doc sat on the roadhouse porch, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, watching stars emerge through thinning clouds. The temperature had dropped, but the wind had died. The violence of earlier felt like a dream now, distant, unreal. Emma joined him, 2 fresh cups of coffee in hand. She changed into dry clothes Rick kept in back, jeans and a Murphy's Roadhouse t-shirt. She looked young and tired and somehow luminous. You should go home, Doc said. Get some sleep. Should, but won't. She handed him a cup. I want to make sure you don't disappear on me. I wasn't planning to. Plans change. Drifters drift. She studied his face. Are you a drifter, Doc? Or are you something else? It was the question he'd been avoiding for 6 years. The question that had no easy answer. I used to be a SEAL, he said. That was my identity. Who I was. Then I became a father. That became my identity. Then I lost Sarah and I didn't know who I was anymore. So I became nothing. A ghost. Someone passing through but never staying. And now I don't know. Tonight felt like waking up. Like I've been sleepwalking for 6 years and suddenly I'm conscious again. He sipped coffee. It's terrifying. Why? Because being conscious means feeling things. And feeling things means pain. And I've had enough pain. Emma nodded slowly. I get that. After my mom died, I went numb for a year. Just nothing. No joy, no sorrow, just gray. And people kept telling me it would get better. Time heals all wounds, all that bullshit. She laughed bitterly. But you know what actually helped? What? Realizing that healing doesn't mean the pain goes away. It means you get stronger at carrying it. The weight doesn't change. You do. She looked at the stars. My mom's been gone 8 years. Some days it still hurts like it happened yesterday. But I've gotten better at living with that hurt. At having joy despite it. At honoring her by being alive. Doc considered this. You're saying I should embrace the pain? I'm saying you should stop running from it. Stop trying to bury it. Acknowledge it, carry it, but don't let it be the only thing you are. She turned to face him. You saved 2 lives tonight. That's who you are. Not the father who lost his daughter. Not the SEAL who retired. The man who jumps into floodwater because someone needs help. That's your identity. What if I fail again? You will. Everyone fails. But failure isn't the end of the story unless you make it the end. Tonight you succeeded. Tomorrow you might fail. The day after you might succeed again. That's life. That's being human. That's being heroic. Not always winning, but always trying. Doc looked at the locket in his palm. Opened it. Sarah's face smiled up at him. Frozen in time. Eternally 5. Eternally happy. Eternally his. I promised her I'd be a hero, he whispered. And you are. You were tonight. You will be again. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. Doc, your daughter is gone. That's a fact you can't change. But you're still here. Still capable. Still needed. The question is, what are you going to do with that? Doc closed the locket. Closed his eyes. Felt something shift inside him. Tectonic plates of grief and guilt sliding into a new configuration. Not disappearing. Just rearranging, making room for something else. Hope, maybe, or purpose, or the terrifying possibility that life could continue even after loss. When he opened his eyes, Emma was watching him, waiting, patient. "I think," Doc said slowly, "I need to stop running, stop drifting, stop hiding." "Okay, what does that look like?" "I don't know yet, but staying might be a start." Emma's face lit up. "Staying? Here? Maybe. This town has a fire department. Probably need volunteers. And Rick mentioned the local hospital is short on EMTs." Doc felt something like a smile trying to form. "Might be useful places for someone with my skills." "Might be," Emma agreed, her own smile breaking free. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The roadhouse behind them was winding down. Truckers heading to their cabs, the last of the coffee being poured, Rick counting the register. Normal things. Life continuing. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said finally. "Sure. The locket. Are you going to keep carrying it?" Doc looked down at the heart-shaped reminder in his palm. The question he'd been avoiding. The choice he needed to make. "Yes," he said, "but differently. Not as a reminder of failure. As a reminder of love. Of why I do this. Of who I'm honoring when I help people." He looked at Emma. "That okay?" "More than okay. That's perfect." Doc started to respond, but sudden shouting from inside the roadhouse cut him off. Rick's voice, urgent. "DOC! Emma! Get in here!" They ran inside, found Rick behind the bar, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. "It's Tyler. He's at County General with Mark and Casey." Casey started seizing. Something about internal bleeding they missed. "They're rushing him to surgery, but..." Doc was moving before Rick finished. "Keys. Now. You can't drive, you're still." "Keys." Rick tossed them. Doc caught them mid-air, already heading for the door. Emma was right behind him. "Doc, what are you doing?" "Casey's bleeding internally. From the crash. The hypothermia masked the symptoms. If they're just now catching it, he's critical. Minutes matter. The hospital is 40 minutes away. Then we'd better hurry." They ran to the truck. Doc drove with the same calculated intensity he'd used during the rescue. Fast but controlled. Taking risks but not stupid ones. Emma didn't speak, just held on. The hospital appeared after 37 minutes. Doc parked illegally, ran inside. Found Tyler in the waiting room, face buried in his hands. "What happened?" Doc demanded. Tyler looked up. They said bleeding around his spleen. From the impact when we crashed. They're operating now, but he's lost a lot of blood and... His voice broke. "This is my fault. If I hadn't been drinking, if I hadn't crashed." "Where's the waiting room for surgery?" "Third floor. But they said family only." Doc was already moving. Found the elevators. Punched the button with perhaps more force than necessary. Emma caught up as the doors opened. "Doc, you can't just walk into an operating room. Watch me." Third floor. Surgery wing. Doc spotted the nurse's station. Approached with military directness. The nurse looked up, saw his intensity, started to object. "I need to speak with the surgeon operating on Casey Jennings," Doc said. "Sir, you can't. I pulled him from a submerged vehicle 3 hours ago. I was in the water with him. I know his medical history from tonight. The surgeon needs my observations." The nurse hesitated. Doc pulled out his old military ID. Still said active because he'd never bothered getting a new one. The Department of Defense seal did its work. "Wait here," she said. 5 minutes later, a surgeon emerged. Older woman, gray hair, exhausted eyes. "You the one who pulled Casey out of the flood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me what happened. Every detail." Doc rattled off observations. Impact angle, water temperature, time submerged, rescue sequence, symptoms observed. He spoke in medical terminology, using precision he'd learned as a combat medic, details that only someone trained would notice. The surgeon listened, nodding. "The leg injury. Did you manually extract it from under the dashboard?" "Yes." "Show me how you pulled." Doc demonstrated the angle, the force, the leverage point. The surgeon's eyes widened. You may have saved his life twice tonight. What? The way you pulled his leg, you repositioned torn vessels. Reduced bleeding that would have been catastrophic otherwise. The spleen injury is serious but manageable because you unknowingly applied pressure that slowed the hemorrhage. She looked at Doc with something like respect. What's your medical background? Combat medic. Navy SEAL. That tracks. Only someone with battlefield training would make those choices instinctively. She checked her watch. I need to get back. But you should know, your actions in that water bought Casey the time he needed. We can fix this. She disappeared back through the surgical doors. Doc stood there, processing. Emma touched his arm. You heard her, right? You saved him. Again. I just pulled him out of the water. No. You did it right. You did it smart. You used 20 years of training to save a life even when you didn't know you were saving it. Emma's voice was fierce. This is who you are. This is what you do. You save people. Doc leaned against the wall. The hospital corridor was that particular shade of institutional beige that made everything feel surreal. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Somewhere a monitor beeped. The sounds and smells of a place where life and death negotiated constantly. He'd spent 2 years in hospitals with Sarah. Hated them. Hated the smell, the sounds, the false hope followed by crushing reality. But tonight, he was here for a different reason. Here because his skills, his training, his refusal to quit, they mattered. They saved lives. Tyler appeared in the corridor, Mark limping beside him. The nurse said, You're talking to the surgeons. Is Casey? He's in surgery. They think he'll make it. Tyler's legs gave out. He slid down the wall, sobbing with relief. Thank God. Thank God. Mark sat beside him, one hand on his friend's shoulder. Both of them young, scared, confronting their mortality. Both of them alive because Doc had been in the right place at the right time with the right skills. Coincidence? Fate? Divine intervention? Doc didn't know. But sitting there, watching these two young men process their brush with death, he felt something click into place. Puzzle piece he'd been missing for 6 years. Purpose. Not redemption. You couldn't redeem yourself for losses beyond your control. But purpose that you could find. That you could choose. Emma sat beside him. Didn't speak. Just sat, her shoulder touching his, providing presence without pressure. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the surgeon emerged. He's stable, she announced. Lost a lot of blood, but we got the bleeding stopped. He'll need recovery time, but he's going to live. The corridor erupted. Tyler and Mark hugging, crying, laughing. Emma squeezing Doc's hand so tight it almost hurt. Relief like a physical wave. The surgeon approached Doc specifically. I meant what I said earlier. You saved his life. Twice. If you ever want to put that training to use, we're always looking for qualified EMTs. Pays terrible, hours worse. But the work matters. Doc looked at her. At the exhaustion and satisfaction in her eyes. The look of someone who just pulled a life back from the edge. He knew that look. Had worn it himself in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in 100 different operations. The look that said, today death didn't win. I'll think about it, Doc said. Good. She handed him a card. Call me when you're ready. She left. The corridor slowly emptied. Mark and Casey's families arrived. Tearful reunions, grateful handshakes for Doc, promises to stay in touch. Eventually, it was just Doc and Emma, sitting on uncomfortable hospital chairs, exhausted and wired in something else. Something new. You're going to take the job, Emma said. Not a question. Maybe. Document. Probably. Yes. He looked at the card in his hand. It feels right. Using what I know. Helping people. Maybe that's how I honor Sarah. Not by hiding. By doing what she asked. Protecting people. Yeah. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. For what it's worth, I think she'd be proud of you. Doc's throat tightened. You think. I know. You jumped into floodwater for strangers. You talked down a drunk man without violence. You saved 3 lives in one night. That's not just training. That's character. That's heart. She looked up at him. That's her legacy living through you. Doc opened the locket one more time. Sarah's face smiled up at him, gap-toothed and eternal. I'll make you proud, he promised silently. Not by being perfect, but by trying, by showing up, by protecting people like you asked. He closed the locket, tucked it into his shirt, close to his heart, where it belonged. Let's go home, Emma said. I don't have a home. She smiled. You do now. The difference between a tragedy and a triumph? Sometimes it's just one person who refuses to walk away. One person who shows up when it matters. One person who uses their gifts when others need them most. We share these stories because they're real, because they remind us that heroes aren't perfect. They're just people who choose to act. Subscribe so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world, or yourself, or what you're capable of when it matters most. And if you still haven't subscribed, comment below, what would it take? We're listening. The radio crackled at 3:47 a.m. All units, we have a structure fire at 1247 Oak Street. Possible occupants trapped inside. Repeat, possible occupants trapped. Doc was already moving. Turnout gear on in 45 seconds. He timed it. A SEAL habit he couldn't break. The fire station came alive around him. Volunteers rousing, truck engines starting, the organized chaos of people trained for crisis. He'd been volunteering for 4 months now. Also working part-time as an EMT at County General. Also teaching tactical first aid to local law enforcement. Also, somehow, building a life that felt like more than just survival. The fire truck screamed through pre-dawn darkness. Doc rode in back, going through mental checklists. Structure fire. Occupants trapped. Rescue protocol. He'd done this dozens of times now, not fire specifically, but rescues. Pulling people from danger. Using his skills for salvation instead of combat. Felt right. More right than anything had felt in 6 years. The house was fully involved when they arrived. Flames pouring from windows. Smoke like a living creature. Chief Martinez was already establishing perimeter, coordinating with police, calling for backup. Doc, she shouted. We've got reports of a child on the 2nd floor. Parents made it out, but the daughter ran back in for the family dog. 8 years old. Named Lily. 8 years old. Sarah had been 7. Doc felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not panic. Not anymore. Recognition. This was why he was here. This was the moment all his training, all his pain, all his survival had been leading to. I'll get her, Doc said. Chief Martinez hesitated. Doc, the structure's unstable. Another minute and then I'd better move fast. He grabbed his SCBA mask, checked his air supply. 60 minutes at normal breathing. 15 in a structure fire when your heart rate spikes and fear makes you gulp air. He knew his physiology, knew what he was capable of, knew he wasn't leaving an 8-year-old girl to burn. He entered through the front door, or what used to be the front door. The heat was immediate and vicious. His gear protected him, but barely. The smoke was thick enough to taste even through the respirator. Lily, he shouted. Lily, where are you? Training kicked in. Search pattern. Right wall. Sweep each room systematically. Don't skip areas. Don't assume. Every second counts, but panic kills faster than fire. First room. Clear. Second room. Clear. The stairs were ahead, partially collapsed. Flames licking the railings. Unstable. Dangerous. Possibly fatal. He climbed them anyway. The 2nd floor was hell, literally. Ceiling sagging, floors groaning. Smoke so thick his flashlight barely penetrated. His radio crackled with commands to evacuate, warnings about structural failure, orders he was deliberately ignoring. Lily, can you hear me? A sound. Faint. Could be the house settling. Could be a scared child. He followed it. 3rd door on the right. Bedroom. Pink walls barely visible through the smoke. Stuffed animals on the floor. And there, curled in the corner, clutching a small dog. A child. Lily. 8 years old. Dark hair. Unconscious from smoke inhalation. The dog was still alive. Whimpering. protective of its human even in extremis. Doc moved fast, checked her pulse, thready but present. Scooped her up, grabbed the dog. 45 pounds of child plus 15 pounds of terrier. 60 pounds total. He'd carried wounded teammates twice that weight through hostile territory. He could do this. The floor groaned, then cracked. Doc ran. Not toward the stairs. They were collapsing, flames completely engulfing them now. Toward the window. Second story. 20-foot drop. Safer than burning alive. He kicked out the window. Looked down. The truck crew had positioned the ladder, but it wasn't in place yet. No time. The floor was actively collapsing beneath his feet. Doc did the math in a fraction of a second. 20 feet. Land wrong, break both legs. Land right, he'd survive. The child would survive. The dog would survive. No choice at all, really. He jumped. The landing was brutal, combat roll, absorbing impact through legs and shoulders, protecting Lily and the dog with his body. Pain shot through his left ankle. Probably sprained. Possibly broken. Didn't matter. He ran toward the perimeter. Handed Lily to waiting paramedics. Handed the dog to her sobbing parents. Then his legs gave out and he sat down hard on the grass, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Chief Martinez appeared above him. That was the stupidest, bravest, most reckless thing I've ever seen. Is she alive? She's breathing. They're working on her now. Good. Doc pulled off his mask. Gulped air that tasted like smoke and victory. Good. The house collapsed behind them with a roar. Timbers crashing. Flames shooting skyward. 10 seconds slower and Doc would have been inside when it went down. 10 seconds slower and Lily would have died. But he hadn't been slower. And she hadn't died. The math was starting to balance. Not completely. Never completely. Sarah was still gone. That loss was permanent, irredeemable. But Lily was alive. Mark and Casey were alive. Dozens of others he'd helped over the past 6 months. Alive. Not replacement. Not redemption. Just continuation. Life continuing. Purpose persisting. Pain being transformed into action. Emma found him 20 minutes later, still sitting on the grass, ankle swelling, covered in soot. She'd come when she heard the call. She always came. They weren't dating exactly, but they weren't not dating. They were something undefined, something good, something healing. You jumped out a second-story window, Emma said, sitting beside him. Seemed like the thing to do. With a child and a dog. Yeah. You're insane. Yeah. She took his hand. Squeezed it. How's the ankle? Probably sprained. Probably needs x-rays. Probably. They sat in companionable silence, watching paramedics work, watching firefighters contain the blaze, watching Lily's parents hover near the ambulance where their daughter was being treated. She's going to make it, Emma said. Not a question. Yeah, she is. Doc looked at the locket hanging outside his shirt. He'd started wearing it visible, a reminder rather than a secret. Sarah would be proud. Sarah is proud, Emma corrected gently. Doc nodded. Maybe that was true. Maybe wherever Sarah was. She was watching, approving, understanding that her daddy was finally doing what he'd promised. Protecting people. Being a hero. Not in the movie sense, not with glory and medals. But in the real sense, showing up, using his skills, refusing to walk away when people needed help. Lily's mother approached, tears streaming. You saved her. You saved my baby. What do I? Doc stood, wincing on his bad ankle. Looked at this mother who'd almost lost everything. Saw himself in her, the fear, the gratitude, the desperate need to understand how life could turn on a moment's choice. You don't need to thank me, Doc said quietly. Just hug her tight when she wakes up. Tell her you love her. Be present. That's all that matters. The mother grabbed him in a fierce hug. Thank you. God. Thank you. She left. Doc watched her go, watched her return to the ambulance, watched her climb inside to be with her daughter. Present. That was the word. He'd spent so much of Sarah's life deployed, absent, choosing mission over family. And when she'd needed him most, when cancer had come calling, he'd finally been present. But it was too late. But with Lily, with Mark and Casey, with dozens of others, he'd been present when it mattered. Not too late, not too absent, just there. Maybe that was enough. Maybe presence was its own form of heroism. Come on, Emma said, standing. Let's get that ankle looked at. I can drive. You absolutely cannot drive. Don't make me pull medical authority. Doc smiled, actual smile, the kind that felt increasingly natural. You're not a doctor. I'm dating one who happens to be a stubborn seal. That makes me an expert on poor medical decisions. She helped him up. Come on, hero. Let's get you patched up so you can save more lives tomorrow. They walked toward Emma's car, Doc limping, Emma supporting him. Behind them, the fire was under control. Lily was stable. Another crisis averted. Another life saved. The sun was rising. Actual sunrise, painting the Texas sky in oranges and purples. Doc stopped, watching it, remembering all the sunrises he'd seen in war zones, in training, in the long night after Sarah died when he'd thought he'd never see beauty again. But here it was. Beauty, life, possibility. What are you thinking? Emma asked. Doc looked at her, at this waitress who'd become so much more, who'd listened without judgment, who'd pushed without pressure, who'd been present when he'd needed it most. I'm thinking, Doc said slowly, that I'm finally ready to stop running, to build something, to stay. Emma's face lit up. Stay? Here? In this tiny Texas town? Why not? Town needs EMTs. Fire department needs volunteers. And there's this waitress I know who makes pretty good coffee. Just pretty good? Exceptional. Amazing. Life-changing coffee. Emma laughed. Full, genuine, joyful. The sound cut through the dawn like music. Well, when you put it that way. They continued to the car. Doc looked back once at the smoking remains of the house, at the ambulance carrying Lily to safety, at the sunrise painting everything gold. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory one last time. Daddy, promise you'll always protect people. I promise, Doc whispered to the dawn. I promise, baby girl. Every day. For the rest of my life. And for the first time in 6 years, the promise didn't feel like a burden. Felt like wings. Murphy's Roadhouse looked the same as it had that stormy November night. Same neon signs. Same jukebox in the corner. Same worn stools at the bar. But everything was different. Doc sat at his usual spot, counter seat, back to the wall out of habit, coffee cup steaming. But now he sat with purpose instead of emptiness. Now he came here not to disappear but to connect. Emma worked the early shift, moving between tables with practiced grace. She caught his eye, smiled. He smiled back. They'd been officially together for 8 months now. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Just two people healing together, building something real from shared trauma and unexpected connection. Rick poured fresh coffee. Heard you pulled another kid out of a car wreck last week. Part of the job. Yeah. But you do it better than most. Rick gestured around the roadhouse. You've become something of a legend around here. Doc the Seal. People feel safer knowing you're around. Doc shifted uncomfortably. He'd never wanted to be a legend. Just wanted to be useful. The door opened. Tyler Moss walked in. Clean-shaven, sober, transformed. He'd gotten help after that night, rehab, therapy, AA meetings. He'd been sober for 10 months. Had a steady job. Had started rebuilding his life. Doc. Tyler nodded respectfully. Emma. Tyler. Emma called from across the room. Usual spot? Please. Tyler took a booth. Doc watched him settle in, shoulders relaxed, eyes clear. Not the angry drunk from a year ago, but a man working daily to be better than his worst moment. The front door opened again. Mark and Casey walked in, both fully recovered. They'd become regulars too, stopping by whenever they were in town. They'd both joined the volunteer fire department, inspired by Doc's example. The roadhouse was filling up with people whose lives had been touched, changed, saved. A community built on second chances and survival and the stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Doc felt something warm in his chest. Not happiness, not yet, maybe not ever completely. But something close. Contentment, perhaps. The sense that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. His phone buzzed. Text from Chief Martinez. Training exercise tomorrow. 0600. Don't be late. He typed back, Roger that. Emma slid onto the stool beside him during a break. Busy tomorrow? Fire department training. Then EMT shift at the hospital. Then maybe dinner with you if you're free. I'm free. She leaned against him, comfortable and close. You know what today is? Doc did know. November 14th. The anniversary of Sarah's death. 7 years now. 7 years of carrying the weight, learning to live with it, transforming grief into purpose. Yeah, he said quietly. I know. You doing okay? I am, actually. I miss her. Always will. But today doesn't feel like drowning anymore. Feels like remembering, honoring. He touched the locket. She'd be 14 now, probably giving me hell about curfews and boys and all the normal father-daughter stuff. She'd be proud of you. Maybe. I hope so. Emma kissed his cheek. I know so. Look around, document, look at what you've built. This community, these lives, this purpose. You took your pain and made it matter. That's not failure. That's heroism. Doc looked around the roadhouse. At Tyler, sober and steady. At Mark and Casey, alive and thriving. At Rick, pouring coffee and telling stories. At Emma, beautiful and present and real. At life continuing despite loss. You know what I realized? Doc said. Saving people didn't heal me. Connecting with them did. Being part of something. Mattering to someone. Letting someone matter to me. He looked at Emma. You did that. You made me see that isolation wasn't protection. It was just another kind of death. We did it together, Emma said. You saved me from Tyler that night. I helped save you from yourself. That's what people do. We save each other. The jukebox started playing. Garth Brooks. The Dance. The same song that had been playing a year ago when everything changed. Emma stood, offered her hand. Dance with me. Doc hesitated. He hadn't danced since before Sarah got sick. Hadn't done a lot of things. But sitting here in this roadhouse with this woman on this anniversary, it felt right. He took her hand. Let her lead him to the small space by the jukebox. They swayed together, slowly, while Garth sang about how choosing to live meant choosing pain but also choosing joy. And I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Doc closed his eyes. Let the music wash over him. Let Emma's presence anchor him. Let the memories come without fighting them. Sarah laughing. Sarah hugging him. Sarah saying goodbye. It hurt. God, it still hurt. But Emma was right. Missing the pain would have meant missing everything else. Missing the love. Missing the connection. Missing the chance to honor Sarah by living the way she'd asked. Protecting people, being present, being brave. The song ended. Doc opened his eyes. The roadhouse had gone silent. Everyone watching the seal and the waitress sway together in the amber light. Then someone started clapping. Rick, from behind the bar. Then Tyler joined in. Then Mark and Casey. Then everyone. The whole roadhouse erupting in applause for no reason except that they'd witnessed something real. Doc felt his face flush. Started to pull away. But Emma held him close. Let them, she whispered. Let them celebrate you. You've earned it. Maybe he had. Maybe after 7 years of grief and 6 years of running and 1 year of rebuilding, he'd finally earned the right to be celebrated. To be seen. To be present. The applause faded. Life resumed. But Doc stood there a moment longer, holding Emma, feeling the weight of the locket against his chest and the warmth of the living woman in his arms. Both mattered. Past and present. Loss and love. Pain and possibility. He'd spent years trying to choose one or the other. But the truth was simpler and harder. You carried both. You honored the dead by living fully. You transformed grief into purpose. You found meaning in the continuing, not in the ending. Thank you, Doc said quietly to Emma. For what? For seeing me. For staying. For reminding me that life goes on. Emma smiled. Life doesn't just go on, document. It gets better. If you let it. She was right. It did get better. Not healed. Not fixed. But better. Lighter. More possible. Doc kissed her forehead. Returned to his seat. Finished his coffee. Checked his watch. He had training in the morning. Lives to protect. Purpose to pursue. But for now, in this moment, in this roadhouse, surrounded by people he'd saved and who'd saved him, for now this was enough. This was everything. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered. Is this Doc? Speaking. This is Lily Henderson's father. We met a year ago. The fire. Doc remembered. 8-year-old girl. Second-story window. The dog. I remember. Is everything okay? More than okay. Lily's turning 9 next week. She's having a birthday party and she asked. Well, she insisted that we invite you. She says you're her hero. Wants you to meet her dog properly. When everyone's not on fire. Doc felt his throat tighten. I'd be honored. Saturday at 2. I'll text you the address. And Doc? Thank you. Every day I have with my daughter is because of you. We don't forget that. Just hug her tight. Doc said. The same thing he always said. That's all that matters. He hung up. Looked at Emma, who'd heard the whole conversation. Birthday party, huh? She said. Yeah. You going to go? Doc thought about it. A year ago he would have said no. Would have found an excuse. Would have avoided the connection, the reminder, the risk of caring. But that was then. This was now. Yeah, he said. I'm going to go. Good. Emma refilled his coffee. That's the Doc I know. The one who shows up. The one who stays. Doc smiled. Touched the locket one last time. I'm showing up, baby girl. Every day. For everyone. The way you asked me to. Outside, the Texas sun climbed higher. The storm from a year ago was long gone. The sky was clear. The world continued. And Doc, haunted, healed, heroic, continued with it. Not running anymore. Not hiding anymore. Just living. Protecting. Serving. Being exactly who Sarah had asked him to be. A hero. Not because he never failed, but because he kept trying. And in the end, that was the only kind of heroism that mattered. The roadhouse sits quiet now in the hours before dawn. Empty booths. Clean floors. The jukebox silent. But if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of that November night when everything changed. When a drunk man raised his hand. When a quiet man intervened. When a waitress saw through walls. When two strangers became something more. When pain transformed into purpose. When a seal who'd lost his way found it again in the most unexpected place. This is what we miss when we let grief consume us. When we hide from connection. When we convince ourselves that protecting our hearts means closing them completely. Doc spent 6 years running from his pain. But pain has a way of catching up. The question isn't whether you'll face it. It's what you'll do when you finally stop running. Will you stay buried? Or will you climb out? Will you isolate? Or will you connect? Will you let your worst moment define you? Or will you let your next moment redefine you? Every single day, in towns across this country, people are fighting battles you can't see, carrying losses you can't imagine, bearing weights that would crush most of us. Some of them are sitting in roadhouses right now, alone, lost, convinced they have nothing left to give. They're wrong. And maybe, just maybe, they need to hear Doc's story. They need to know that coming back is possible, that purpose can be rebuilt, that life continues even after unimaginable loss. We share these stories because they're true, because they matter, because someone watching right now is drowning and doesn't know they can still swim. Subscribe so you're here for the next story, the next warrior who found redemption, the next impossible rescue, the next reminder that heroism isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. These stories aren't entertainment. They're lifelines, and you never know who's reaching for one right now. If you haven't subscribed yet, we need to ask, what's holding you back? Is it skepticism? Distraction? The belief that these stories don't matter? Comment below and tell us. We're listening. We want to understand. Because if even one person subscribes and hears the story they need to hear, the story that keeps them going one more day, that gives them permission to try again, that reminds them they're not alone, then this matters. Then Doc's story matters. Then your story matters. We're all carrying something, all fighting battles, all trying to figure out how to live with our pain while still living our lives. Doc figured it out. Emma figured it out. Tyler figured it out. You can too. But you can't do it alone. Subscribe. Join this community. Be part of something bigger than yourself. Because at Silent Trident Stories, we don't just tell stories about warriors. We tell stories about being human, about failing and rising, about losing and finding, about the long, hard journey from darkness to light. And we'd be honored if you walked that road with us. Subscribe now, comment below, share with someone who needs it. Because these stories, they're not just stories, they're lifelines. And someone is reaching for one right now. Silent Trident Stories, where warriors find their voice and everyone finds their strength.